One of the recent crazier pushes has been that we ought to feel bad for people that are breaking the law. We should understand why they have law.
A Cook County court has reversed some of Dalton Mayor Tiffany Henyard's decision.
At last night's village board meeting, Mayor Tiffany Henyard announced a 30-day temporary appointment for the police chief, village attorney, special counsel, and executive assistant. This move appeared to be an attempt to garner sympathy by highlighting those who might be affected by leadership decisions. In a recent online segment, political commentator Candace Owens criticized Dalton, Illinois, Mayor Tiffany Henyard, alleging that she engaged in unethical practices to maintain her position. Owens, known for her outspoken views, accused Henyard of actions that have left local residents feeling pressured and silenced. According to Owens, Henyard has allegedly harassed residents and threatened to withhold municipal services unless they supported her leadership or refrained from public criticism. Owens did not hold back, characterizing Henyard's actions as dishonest and accusing her of using intimidation tactics to suppress opposition. She argued that these methods go beyond political strategy and represent abuses of power that undermine Henyard's credibility as a leader. Owens also referenced reports from Dalton residents who claimed they felt pressured to stay silent about the mayor's controversial decisions. This is not the first time Henyard has faced scrutiny. Allegations of misconduct and ongoing legal challenges against her administration have fueled further criticism. Owens asserted that a leader who relies on coercion and intimidation to maintain support is unfit for office. She emphasized that Henyard's behavior reflects a broader pattern of ethical concerns, warning that the situation in Dalton highlights the risks of unchecked power and the lengths to which some leaders may go to secure their positions.
What happens everywhere in the entire world when your parents break the law? It's actually quite audacious to be willing to appear on camera and to ask for sympathy.
According to community leaders, the Henyard administration has been accused of using intimidation tactics to marginalize anyone who challenges her authority or questions the reasoning behind her decisions. Political analyst Candace Owens expressed outrage over what she saw as a breakdown in Henyard's management, criticizing local authorities for their slow response to these allegations. Owens also urged the people of Dalton to reject what she described as growing local oppression and to investigate Henyard's alleged misconduct. The public needs leaders who support them, not ones who work against them, Owens said, stressing that corruption must be addressed. She called for a full investigation into Henyard's actions, warning that if the allegations prove true, there could be serious legal consequences. Many Dalton residents, particularly those who had already expressed dissatisfaction with Henyard's leadership, felt emboldened by Owens's strong remarks. Supporters of Henyard, on the other hand, argued that the mayor had been unfairly accused, with some suggesting that Owens's criticism was too harsh and lacked sufficient evidence. Despite this, the administration has come under increasing scrutiny, and it is expected that Henyard will face further public backlash in the coming weeks, especially after Owens's comments stirred the already tense political climate in Dalton. Social media exploded in response, with many residents supporting Owens's call for change. Numerous people voiced their dissatisfaction with the mayor, accusing her of using coercive methods to silence criticism and suppress dissent. Some even suggested that Henyard should step down in light of the growing allegations and public scrutiny. Meanwhile, Henyard posted a message online congratulating President Trump on his victory in the 2024 presidential election. In her post, she praised Trump for his historic comeback and called for unity and cooperation moving forward. "Let's put our differences aside and work together," Henyard said, echoing sentiments of teamwork and a focus on the future. This message, which she shared just an hour after Trump's victory, stood in stark contrast to her previous political rhetoric. Some viewed her sudden change in tone as an attempt to align herself with Trump in an effort to salvage her reputation amid mounting controversies. "I believe we can restore America to its former glory," Henyard continued in her post. "I Have many great ideas to share, and I would like to meet with you to discuss the situation in the municipalities of Dolton and Thornton Township. She added that she had sent Trump a personal message and hoped to collaborate for the greater good. Henyard's willingness to publicly support Trump seemed like a strategic move, particularly given the political and legal pressures she was facing. The timing of Henyard's post caught many by surprise. Typically, political leaders offer formal congratulations emphasizing unity, but Henyard's message stood out due to its enthusiastic praise for Trump's victory, which was declared earlier than many had anticipated. Trump's decisive win, coming faster than expected, shocked the political world. As Henyard publicly embraced the president, questions arose about the sincerity of her message. Many were quick to point out the irony, given her history in Dolton. Her administration has been marred by accusations of stifling dissent and creating a hostile environment for those who oppose her. Henyard has been involved in multiple legal battles, with lawsuits alleging abuse of power and suppression of criticism. Reports of coercion to silence residents have led some to question whether her recent calls for unity were genuine or simply a means to deflect from her leadership controversies. Moreover, Henyard's actions have often been perceived as self-serving. Critics argue that she attends meetings only when it benefits her image or when something significant is at stake. Dolton trustees have expressed frustration, believing she is more focused on maintaining power than serving the town's residents. Now, as Henyard seeks to align herself with Trump, it appears to be a desperate move to shift public perception and gain favor with a more influential political figure. Trump's return to the presidency has solidified his influence, and Henyard may be hoping to position herself as a valuable ally despite her troubled track record. Her sudden outreach to Trump is particularly notable, given the allegations of using underhanded tactics to maintain control in Dolton. Her recent public praise for Trump, despite past political maneuvering and allegations of misconduct, has left many observers puzzled. Some speculate that Henyard hopes Trump's comeback will shield her from consequences, while others believe she is seeking validation from a high-profile political figure. As Henyard faces mounting criticism, legal battles, and increasing unrest, within her own community, her leadership is at a crossroads. From her online message to Trump to her controversial management of Dolton, her recent actions have only intensified the already tense political climate. Whether she succeeds in gaining Trump's support or faces further fallout remains to be seen. However, one thing is certain: her attempt to present herself as a collaborative leader may be too little, too late.
South suburban Dolton at the village board meeting tonight, embattled Mayor Tiffany Henyard spoke out after public comments addressing respect in the meeting.
This is Mike talking about nothing. And when I say nothing, you're talking about Tiffany and you. So that means that you really are fans of ours, and I appreciate that. Because normally you will come up here and you'll talk about the business as relates to our business. But not one of you talk about any business.
From the very beginning, the situation was deeply flawed. Anyone expecting an orderly democratic process or even a simple public forum quickly realized they were in for something far worse. What unfolded could only be described as chaos. Tiffany Henyard, acting as a misguided leader, orchestrated a meeting that descended into complete disarray. Henyard, who values loyalty and control above all else, took extreme measures to exclude Trustee Carlisle from meaningful participation, effectively sidelining her and making the experience as uncomfortable as possible. Instead of addressing security and procedural challenges with careful consideration, Henyard pushed forward recklessly, prioritizing control over collaboration. As a result, any semblance of civility quickly dissolved. What could have been mistaken for a scene from a middle school drama became, for Henyard, an opportunity to assert her authority, even at the expense of a township representative. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly evident that Henyard was escalating her tactics, reinforcing the idea that those who did not align with her would be sidelined. This sentiment echoed throughout the meeting as she bulldozed through proceedings, treating dissent as a personal affront. When Trustee Key Price, an elected official, failed to acknowledge Henyard's self-assumed authority, she did not back down, she doubled down. Her behavior was less about leadership and more about personal power struggles, something residents had come to expect from her. Henyard appeared trapped in an echo chamber, constantly praising her own decisions while dismissing the legitimate concerns of her colleagues. The meeting soon devolved into a chaotic spectacle, with Henyard using every opportunity to promote herself, framing her actions as being in the community's best interest, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. Trustee Gonzalez, recognizing the dysfunction, chose to leave rather than endure what had become an increasingly unproductive and chaotic environment. Instead of acknowledging the underlying frustrations or reassessing her approach, Henyard turned Gonzalez's departure into another opportunity to bolster her own image. She positioned herself as the sole advocate for transparency and accountability, particularly regarding the forensic audit for Thornton Township, which had been approved. However, it should be noted that this audit specifically focused on credit card usage by trustees Keith Freeman and Carlisle, an issue Henyard herself had emphasized. As the meeting spiraled out of control, Henyard's rhetoric took a sharp turn. She attempted to blame Gonzalez's exit on the IT department, using it as a distraction to deflect from her own leadership failures. By doing so, she framed Gonzalez's departure as an abandonment of duty while portraying herself as the only one truly fighting for the community's interests. This was a calculated maneuver designed to discredit her colleagues while diverting attention away from her own shortcomings. Rather than taking responsibility for the collapse of the meeting, Henyard manipulated the situation to paint Gonzalez as negligent. She cast herself as the lone defender of accountability, but in reality, this approach only exposed her self-serving tactics. The meeting was no longer about collaboration or problem-solving. It had become a stage for Henyard to control the narrative and tighten her grip on power. As the chaos continued, it became clear that Henyard had no intention of fostering meaningful dialogue. Her leadership style was rooted in manipulation and self-interest, with little regard for the community's actual needs. She was determined to control the discussion at all costs, even if it meant deepening divisions within the board and the Bao community. The ramifications of her actions will be felt long after the meeting ended, especially with election season approaching. When voters head to the polls, they will remember how Henyard treated Carlisle and how she attempted to discredit Gonzalez. These actions revealed Henyard's true priorities, preserving her own power at the expense of collaboration, transparency, and the public's trust. The situation reached a breaking point as Henyard's leadership style became increasingly intolerable for those frustrated by her autocratic approach. What was meant to be a public forum for open discussion, guided by Robert's Rules of Order, quickly devolved into chaos. Robert's rules are designed to ensure fair dialogue and allow all voices to be heard, yet Henyard disregarded them entirely, improvising as she saw fit. Each time a motion was introduced, Henyard either blocked it outright or rushed through it with little regard for proper procedure, making it unclear whether she had even reviewed the proposals before allowing votes. Her actions were not about engaging with the community or fostering debate. They were about advancing her personal agenda. If a motion or comment posed a challenge to her authority, it was swiftly dismissed, and any attempt at open discussion was stifled. There was no space for dissent. Henyard made it clear that those who did not align with her were unwelcome. This approach only deepened divisions within the board and the community, creating an environment where trust and cooperation became nearly impossible. The meeting was a failure in every respect. What should have been a space for productive discussion and problem-solving became a farcical display of Henyard's desperation to maintain control. Her actions and demeanor stood in stark contrast to the leadership the community needed. As the chaos unfolded, it became increasingly evident that Henyard was prioritizing power over progress. With election season looming, her actions during this meeting may serve as a reminder to voters of the leadership challenges facing their community. It became increasingly apparent that Tiffany Henyard was more concerned with maintaining her grip on power than with addressing the real issues facing the community. In the aftermath of the meeting, the damage was undeniable. Henyard had alienated her colleagues, undermined public trust, and revealed just how far she was willing to go to protect her own ego and political ambitions. The public would not soon forget how she treated those who disagreed with her, or how she manipulated the narrative to avoid taking responsibility for her own failures. As election season loomed, it seemed increasingly likely that Henyard's actions during this disastrous meeting would have lasting consequences for her political future. What was meant to be a public forum quickly spiraled into complete chaos, with Henyard at the center, disregarding any semblance of order or democratic process. She ignored motions, bulldozed through critical issues with an authoritarian approach, and expected unwavering compliance from those present. This created an incredibly frustrating environment for anyone hoping for a civil exchange of ideas. At one point, Henyard appeared to position herself as the misunderstood hero of a political drama, portraying herself as a lone warrior against a corrupt system. Her speech, which dragged on for nearly an hour, felt more like an unfiltered reality TV tirade than a discussion of township affairs. She framed herself as the only official genuinely advocating for the people while accusing others of self-interest, corruption, and exploitation. One of the key issues she highlighted was a $2.2 million tax fund for Thornton Township homeowners, which she claimed was taxpayer-funded and therefore belonged to the people. However, as her monologue continued, it became evident that this was less about transparency and accountability and more about solidifying her re-election prospects and strengthening her political position. She seemed more focused on crafting a political narrative than on genuinely addressing community concerns. Henyard went so far as to accuse anyone who left the meeting or disagreed with her of being part of an unnamed hate group, or, at the very least, of deliberately causing chaos to undermine the meeting's purpose. This wasn't just disruptive behavior. It was a clear attempt to control the narrative by painting herself as a victim. She framed her critics as enemies of progress, dismissing their concerns as illegitimate and accusing them of being part of some opposition movement. However, the community was growing weary of the spectacle. They hadn't signed up for a political soap opera. They wanted real leadership, not a mayor who took every disagreement personally and turned every debate into a battle for dominance. Henyard's self-aggrandizing rhetoric and manipulative tactics were beginning to wear thin, further alienating those who still believed in the integrity of the democratic process. Meanwhile, Trustee Carlisle, though uncertain about her next steps, remained committed to her responsibilities to the township. However, her role had become a point of contention. The so-called list of Henyard's achievements was beginning to look more like an exercise in finger-pointing rather than meaningful governance. Henyard's erratic behavior had clouded the entire dynamic of the board, leaving Carlisle in a difficult position, trying to fulfill her duties while dealing with the fallout of Henyard's chaotic leadership. As tensions rose and frustration mounted among both board members and the broader community, the atmosphere became increasingly toxic. The ideals of civil discourse and transparent decision-making were fading fast. Instead, the township found itself entangled in a power struggle, where leadership took a backseat to political maneuvering and personal vendettas. The people of Thornton Township deserved better. Whether Henyard recognized it or not, the meeting had laid bare the cracks in her leadership, and the public was taking notice. The public forum had devolved into a stage for Tiffany Henyard to pursue her own agenda at any cost. Driven by ego and an unrelenting thirst for power, she had damaged her credibility and alienated even those who had once supported her. The township, desperate for real leadership, was left wondering whether they would ever see a return to order, fairness, and genuine progress, or if they were trapped in an endless cycle of political drama fueled by one person's need for control. Henyard's political strategy had drawn sharp criticism, particularly for her tendency to deflect blame and paint herself as the victim, while simultaneously throwing others under the bus. whether they were board members, residents, or even the media, whom she accused of damaging Dalton's reputation. Frequently seen as the mastermind behind the chaos, Henyard had found a key ally in Keith Price, who remained a steadfast supporter throughout the controversies surrounding her tenure. Beyond internal conflicts, Henyard's actions were now attracting scrutiny from critics outside Dalton's immediate political sphere. One such critic, Candace Owens, took a sharp stance in analyzing Henyard's leadership, particularly the political dynamics unfolding in Dalton, Illinois. Owens pointed to patterns of intimidation, abuse of authority, and manipulation under Henyard's rule. She specifically accused Henyard of threatening to withhold essential services from citizens in an effort to silence dissent, arguing that her leadership prioritized power and self-preservation over the democratic processes meant to guide a community. Owens also criticized Henyard's public stances, particularly her overt support of former President Donald Trump, suggesting that it was less about fostering unity and more about bolstering Henyard's own position amid mounting legal challenges. Critics, including Owens, argued that this political maneuver was a reflection of Henyard's opportunistic nature, using Trump's backing to solidify her power as she faced growing scrutiny due to ongoing federal investigations. This critique highlighted a broader issue in Dalton, a community increasingly frustrated by what many perceived as systemic corruption and a glaring lack of transparency in local government. Owens asserted that Henyard's actions demonstrated a self-centered commitment to her own agenda, shifting political alliances to suit her needs, rather than exhibiting genuine dedication to public service. Her analysis underscored the growing disillusionment among Dalton residents, who felt they were witnessing political theater rather than meaningful leadership. The tension in Dalton was palpable. Fed up with the toxic political climate, disillusioned residents were calling for real change and accountability. They demanded more than political spectacle. They wanted a government that prioritized the needs of the people rather than the egos of its leaders. Henyard's increasingly divisive leadership style was deepening fractures within the community, and its impact was likely to be felt for years to come. As the situation continued to unfold, it became clear that Dalton stood at a crossroads. The town's future could either cement Henyard's grip on power or spark a broader movement toward democratic accountability and reform. The response of both Dalton's officials and its citizens would play a crucial role in shaping the town's political landscape in the years ahead. Calls for investigations and increased transparency were growing louder, driven by the belief that this crisis could serve as a catalyst for a larger conversation about moral leadership and the dangers of unchecked authority. With mounting public dissatisfaction, Dalton residents were beginning to demand a return to values rooted in fairness, integrity, and openness. This push for accountability could mark the beginning of a significant political shift within the town. If Owens's accusations proved true, they would highlight the complex relationship between local politics and individual leadership styles, raising pressing questions about Dalton's future governance and the urgent need for reform. As the community continued to grapple with these issues, calls for transparent, accountable leadership would only grow stronger. This movement could ultimately reshape Dalton's political landscape for years to come. The town's future now depended on whether its leaders would embrace a more democratic and inclusive system or remain entrenched in the control of those who prioritized personal power over the public good. Dalton's story serves as a case study in how power, corruption, and leadership dynamics shape a community's future. Ultimately, the outcome will determine whether the town moves toward a fairer, more transparent system of governance or remains mired in political chaos and self-serving leadership.